Hello and welcome to the Pancake King Life and Marriage on the Spectrum. I am your host, Forrest, and this week is what some in the anime community might call a filler episode. An episode to hold you over until, let's be honest, the real thing comes out. It's been a lot busier lately than I thought it would be, with me getting back into college and being busy at my recently new job. So, with that all being said, it's been a little bit harder for me to keep up the time to work on a script. I've got a script done for the next episode, but still need to get it recorded and edited. So with that being said, I'm going to continue what I said I would do before and trickle out these episodes of me and my wife Kay reviewing the K-drama Extraordinary Attorney Woo. This was originally for paid subscribers on my Substack at thepancakeking.substack.com about 2 years ago, and now I am bringing it to you, the people. For each episode, I think there were like 15 or 16 of them. I'll be releasing episode 2 today, which will be attached to this episode. So I hope you guys enjoy that, and please check out Extraordinary Attorney Woo. It is a wonderful show, so that it would be easier for you to follow along with our discussions of each episode. But even if you don't watch the show, I hope that you stick around to listen to Kay and I discuss episode 2 of Extraordinary Attorney Woo, and I'll see you next week for a real episode. It's one of my favorites so far. So be sure to like and subscribe and enjoy our review. Hello everybody, and welcome to a bonus episode of the Pancake King, Life and Marriage on the Spectrum. If you are a paid subscriber on my Substack, thepancakeking.substack.com, then this is how you are listening. And with that being the case, thank you for upgrading your subscription to a paid one and supporting the show and what we do here. So, my name is Forrest, although I'm sure you already know that, and with me, I have KG.
Hello.
That's the best that she can come up with this episode instead of sup. So,
I already did sup. I can only do that for so long.
Are you sure? That's like your signature greeting.
Okay, you want me to do it again?
Yeah, it's like when Blade says greetings. You know,
Fine,
like
you can cut this part out. Cut this part out. Sup.
There we go. Perfect. There you go. And then my greeting is typically, hey. Typically day to day. So, we're here to review another episode of the K-drama Extraordinary Attorney Woo. This is episode 2. What's the name of that second episode?
The wedding dress that slipped off.
Okay. All right. So that's the episode that we will be reviewing, and we already went through the kind of the main cast of the characters in the first episode and a little bit of the premise. So in this episode, we'll be reviewing how the show tackles autism again. But before we do that, why don't we get to the plot?
At her lavish wedding prepared by the Daehyun Hotel, bride Kim Hwa-young trips on her dress, exposing herself and her tattoo of the Buddha. Humiliated, her father, Kim Jong-gu, rejects his lawyer's advice to accept the hotel's generous refund and hires Hanbada instead. Determined to outdo rival law firm Taesan, Son Young agrees to pursue 1 billion won in compensation. A wedding gift to the bride's family of land worth 33.2 billion won will not occur due to the botched wedding, which Young-woo suggests entitles Jung-gu to special damages, despite his daughter's unhappiness with the arranged marriage. Posing as a couple to investigate the hotel's wedding business, Jun-ho sees Young-woo in a different light after she tries on a wedding dress. He enlists a bridal assistant from the hotel to testify that Hwa-young's dress was switched for a looser-fitting version. As the actual aggrieved party, Hwa-young withdraws the lawsuit, telling her father she is in fact a Buddhist and revealing her true love, her girlfriend. Young-woo comes to the attention of Taesan's CEO, Tae Soo-min, at the end. Korean names are hard.
Yeah, they are. It's hard to read that stuff out loud because those aren't the types of names that we give our people over here in America.
And sometimes you have to really. Sometimes the way it's spelled isn't actually how it's pronounced.
Yeah, exactly. So we have this episode where it's basically all about this wedding dress that was basically because there was a problem beforehand, right?
Yeah,
the episode revealed that
the first one accidentally got ripped. That was the one that was styled to the bride, Hwa-young, and it accidentally got ripped by one of the wedding assistants. So they had to replace it with an identical dress, but was looser and thus didn't fit her properly.
Right. Which I remember when you and I had our wedding, and your dress was fantastic.
Yeah,
It could not have been more perfect.
for those who maybe aren't interested in watching it, but or have seen it, and it was a sleeveless, strapless dress. So it was very easy for it to slip, and that is the reason why I chose to get a dress with sleeves.
You had this exact same fear, didn't you?
Yes, I was afraid that something would happen, it would slide down, and everybody would see everything.
I think almost every woman has that fear somewhere
It's
down
also
the
the
road.
reason why we adjusted the bodice, because it had a plunging V-neck. And I was
Right.
and thankfully the dress alterer was like, yeah, I can just sew it up so that the plunging V-neck isn't there anymore. And I'm like, that would be great, actually.
Yeah. Right. So in this episode, we get a little bit more development into Woo's place on the autism spectrum, as well as some development in the relationship between her and Junho. Junho, right? Junho. I'm gonna have to get these down at some point because we're reviewing every episode.
Yes.
Junho, right?
Junho.
My God, I apologize. So Junho, we get a little more development between Junho and Woo in this episode. And I did mention in the last episode when we were reviewing the first, there was some stuff I loved to touch on when it comes to Junho, and how he was willing to communicate with Woo. And I love the fact that he doesn't necessarily care that she has autism. He's very much aware, and he's willing to work with it. And I love how in this episode he does reap some of the consequences to having a relationship on this level, because he mentioned in the last episode that as long as it's just the two of them, of course you can talk about whales. And of course this gets Woo really excited. And now she has it ingrained in her mind that, as long as I just talk about whales with him, he'll listen, and it's okay. So let me call him up and go and dive immediately into talking about whales. And I love that moment. It's a bit of a cliche in comedy, but I love that moment when he's brushing his teeth and she calls him up and just goes right into it. And the screen is that sort of side-by-side thing, that split screen thing where you have him on one side and her on the other, and she's going on. And Junho is just standing there like toothpaste dripping down his chin, has the most put out face imaginable,
like,
because
absolutely done.
Yeah, absolutely done, because in his mind he's like, well, I told her she can do this. And this is what I get.
Yep.
And I think
have to push through it.
Look, almost every autistic parent, I'm sure, has had this before.
Or
I've had this
autistic friend, or a friend of an autistic person, I should say.
I've had this with you. There are times
I've had it with you.
Yeah. Well, I've had it with you more.
I don't know.
No, but there were times where, like, you would have this sort of rant that you needed to get out, and in my mind, I mean, of course, I do the best I can to make it not show on my face, but in my mind, I'm just like, okay, yep. She follows him around a little bit in this episode, just sort of spewing these whale facts and getting weirder about it as she goes, like in terms of like how they mate, and stuff like that. And the best responses that he can come up with is stuff like, "Oh, I see. Oh, okay." I understand, even as an autistic person myself, I understand that struggle that he has, because when you're going through a one-sided conversation like that, where you're allowing the other person to share their passions, there are really only two ideal responses that you have to this, and I think only one of them works best. Number one, one of the only ideal responses is saying stuff like, "Oh, I see," or "Oh," or "Cool," that type of stuff.
It shows you're listening.
Yeah, doing only just basically the bare minimum to make sure you're communicating to the person that at the very least you are listening. You don't have to show like fake interest in something, you know what I mean? You don't have to show fake interest in it. You don't have to fake your interest or something like that. But you are at least showing that you're listening, and that does make a difference for the person on the other end.
Yeah.
And then the second thing, the only other response that you can really have for conversations like these is ask follow-up questions. The problem is that isn't always effective because sometimes you don't know what that follow-up question can be.
Right.
You're not sure like how to come up with a follow-up question.
Unless you're genuinely interested in
Yeah, it's hard for me to come up with follow-up questions. I bring up Blade again, but one of the things that I think he does a pretty good job with, and maybe he'll talk about this in a later episode, but one of the things that he is good at is when he listens, A, and B, he responds to, our topics by bringing up at least one aspect, even if it's a small thing, of what intrigues him so much about it.
Yeah.
And he always goes, and what's so interesting, and and I think that's great. You know, someone like him really has that down.
Yeah. But back to Extraordinary Attorney Woo.
Right. Yeah. But that's a big part of it. Like a big part of this episode was the experience of someone who's not autistic trying to work with interacting with an autistic person, especially when they're going through this passionate tirade or passionate rant.
There was that moment when he was talking to, I think, Choi is the other female lawyer
in the car.
Yeah, in the car.
This was the other thing that I wanted to bring up.
Yeah,
he has this great line, something when she asks him, "And are you just going to listen to her forever?" And he said, well, if I don't, who does or who will?
Yeah. But then she also brings up something that he follows through on, where she was like, well, you got to at least put boundaries down so that she's not calling you up at odd hours of the night. Do you think that's something that works, or do you think that putting limitations on an autistic's passion is something that it would be detrimental to the relationship?
Well, I don't think it would be necessarily detrimental to the relationship because, I mean, both people in a relationship have to have their boundaries or have to have their limits. You don't want to exhaust someone to the point where it doesn't matter how much they love you or how much they care about you or how much they want you to feel like you're listened to and that you're cared for. If you strain those limits that they have, and sometimes they learn what their limits are when during times like these. If you strain those limits, then it does put a strain in the relationship.
Sure.
Because then there's the risk of driving the other person to the point of apathy. And you and I have both had these kinds of conversations. We have driven both both of us to the point of apathy at certain points. It just happens, and you have to learn how to set those boundaries. And once again, I think Junho did a really good job setting those boundaries. I think it was fair, and it didn't seem like Woo was very upset.
No.
She just basically processed what this change was and committed it to memory.
Yeah, for the audience, he said that he'd be willing to listen to her whale talk during lunch if they had lunch together.
Yeah, and I think that's perfectly acceptable.
Yeah.
And keep in mind, I mean, this isn't a marriage, at least not yet. There were some things in this episode that implied that maybe this will go somewhere, and I myself, as a hopeless romantic, am very curious to see where this goes. Well, we'll get to that in a minute, actually. But I do love the fact that he had not necessarily any fear of bringing those boundaries to light, bringing his own personal needs to the front.
Yeah.
I think that's great. It's the healthiest romantic relationship that's not a romantic relationship I've seen on screen in a while. It's a real friendship between a neurotypical and a spectrumite, and I thought it was handled really, really well in this episode.
Yeah, but then it got kind of sad because he said, if you talk to me any other point besides, if you talk to me outside of lunch, you can't talk about whale facts. You have to talk to me about anything else. Yeah,
anything. And then what was it? What was like anything else? When we're so hyper focused on one thing, anything else doesn't exist.
Exactly.
It's just the truth. Like anything else doesn't exist. When my dad, when I was younger, my dad would tell me, "Okay, that's great, son. Like stuff about Star Wars or whatever. Now talk about real life." And I'm like, "Now I've got nothing. Like I don't know. I don't know what to say. I don't know how to follow up on that." I can talk about stuff regarding real life now, but when I was a kid, like it was either Star Wars or The Lord of the Rings for me. It was almost like impossible, like just an impossible thing to think of something else to talk about, you know? And so, like, what about you? Like, when you were younger, like, was it hard for you to take the focus off of something that you were obsessed with and bring it down on something else because maybe one of your parents requested it? Or how did that work?
I don't remember exactly how this conversation went because it was a really long time ago, and it was during my Hardy Boys hyperfixation when I was absolutely obsessed with reading every single book.
That's fair.
And I own almost every single book. That's how far it went.
Yeah.
But I can't remember how the conversation went, but my dad and I were in the car. I think we were on our way to church. And I remember him telling me, like, you gotta stop just talking about Hardy Boys.
So you did have this kind of conversation with your dad, just like I had with mine.
Yeah, but I don't remember. I only remember that part of the conversation. I don't remember, like, what led up to that, what happened afterwards. I just remember him talking, like, you gotta stop talking about that.
Please. I think one of the reasons why people say that, or like our parents say that, is because they don't necessarily want to reach the point of apathy.
Yeah.
They don't want their conversations with us to go through one ear and out the other. If you get what I mean.
And then also they want to help focus the social skills. You can't just talk about one topic all the time.
Yeah, well, at least we understand that now.
Yeah.
One of the great things about not living with our parents anymore and having our own place is that we can indulge in our hyperfixations whenever we want now.
Basically, and we share hyperfixations, which is even better.
Yes, it's like max power of hyperfixations, right? And as long as they don't, and basically the only thing that you can't allow those hyperfixations to mess with is, real responsibilities.
Yeah.
So, don't not go to work because you want to stay home and indulge in X, that type of thing.
Yeah.
And that's pretty easy. We need money.
But again, going back to Extraordinary Attorney Wu.
Yeah, but this is the reason why we bring up these aspects or these parts of the episode, is to branch off into these.
Yeah, but I don't want the tangent to go on too long though.
Yeah.
But anyway, back to talk when he was setting these boundaries. He's like, you can talk about anything else. But then when he tried to talk to her outside of lunch, she just walked away.
Yeah, because she couldn't think of anything.
Yeah.
Like, her mind was blank.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you just look so sad.
I know.
You just look so sad.
I know. Yeah.
But also because they had that moment that you can bring up now.
What was that again?
The moment, the wedding, the quote-unquote wedding.
Oh,
moment.
yeah, there was, this was kind of funny. I thought this was interesting. Throughout the show up to this point, Wu typically has the same, like, facial expression, or even kind of like the most subtle smile or whatever. But then she had to try on a wedding dress because they were investigating the company that produced the dress.
The wedding dress.
That produced the dress in the first place. So she ends up trying on a dress, and she just, like, breaks out in this big smile when Junho sees her. It's kind of sappy.
Yeah.
But, like, it was
in
like
a good way.
Yeah, it was kind of sappy, but it was like the one time in the show up to this point where Wu's face really kind of breaks, and she has this big grin on her face and stuff like that. I mean, autistic people are capable of this, but it takes a lot to get there. Not in your case. It's easy for you to break out into a grin.
Yeah. But he had this big smile. So I think, and Junho was, like, staring at her.
Yeah.
With, like,
he was captivated.
Yeah.
He was captivated.
It was the cliche, the nerd takes off her glasses and she's a supermodel type thing.
Yeah, right. Although I didn't really feel like she looked that different with the dress on. I think it was pretty great.
But I think her hair was pulled back a little bit. But, she's always dressed in her loose-fitting clothing. She's never worn something as fancy as a wedding dress.
Yeah, this is true.
Yeah.
This is true. There was a lot of just kind of the investigation stuff into the wedding and the dress and everything.
Well, let's talk about one of the overall theme of the episode. Psychological independence from your parents.
Yeah. So, do you want to go into that a little bit?
Well, they were, in regards to the autistic aspect, it was mostly Wu thinking about how she still really isn't totally independent from her father.
Not totally. Doesn't she live in, like, a tiny apartment behind her dad's shop or something? Behind her dad's place or something? Something
like that. She still lives with her father. Quan, the other male lawyer, basically asked her, "Have you never cooked a meal for yourself?" And she doesn't answer.
Yeah, because she hasn't,
Because her father cooks all her meals.
Yeah, yeah. I thought that was interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not, like, I had my complaints or my reservations about, the girl with the dress in the first place. What was her name?
Hua Young.
Hua-yeon.
Hua Young.
Young. Okay.
Hua Young. Hua Young.
Hua. This is going to be most of the reviews where it's just me trying to figure out how to say names.
Hua Young, as in young.
Church.
As in young person. Hua Young.
Okay. It's like in Red versus Blue when Tucker is trying to teach his kid how to talk or how to say names. Not blarg, church. But at the there's a great moment that I had to bring up at the end of the episode. You know where I'm going with this.
Yeah.
There's a great moment at the end of the episode when the whole investigation's done.
Well,
case is over.
You should bring up what happened at the beginning, because that ties into what happened at the end. The conversation that happened at the beginning.
Well, why don't you explain it?
Well, at the beginning, her father and Wu are watching TV, and there's, I'm guessing, a commercial or something, or some sort of drama where there's a wedding scene going on, and he's like staring at the bride, like, oh, I wish you would get married. I hope you get married someday. And he's like, it's a father's wish to walk her. It's a father's dream to walk his daughter down the aisle.
Yeah, right. That's right. And then at the very end of the episode, that's right. Wu says something along the lines of, I'm probably not going to get married because of my autism.
Yeah.
And she doesn't even necessarily say that in a way that implied that she was even upset.
No, it was very matter-of-fact, logical.
Yeah, very matter-of-fact, very factual. Like, she spoke in a very factual manner.
Yeah.
And obviously, that was sad.
Mm-hmm.
But I loved her father's whole reaction to that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I loved it. Because he's basically at a loss for words.
Mm-hmm.
And he wants that kind of life for Wu. He wants her to live a happy life like that, where she can, be with someone who loves her in that way. And after she says, I'm probably not going to get married because of my autism. Well, good night.
Yeah.
and walks off. And the show does a really good job of allowing the actors to breathe and kind of allowing the editing to slow down. So we get this pretty long shot of the dad just sort of zoning out.
Mm-hmm.
He's like kind of slowly eating and in deep thought. And it's great because it showed that that sort of weight that her father was dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
How can my daughter grow up in a world where she's different, but she can still live the kind of life that other people live?
Yeah.
That's a big deal to him. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was handled extremely well.
It was a very good ending scene.
Excellent ending scene. I don't think it was the very last scene of the episode. I kind of wish it was.
No, the last scene was with the CEO of the rival law firm.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah, that would it would have been great if it had just ended there, just on a very thoughtful note. But I really liked that. And a lot of the stuff they covered in this episode was really great. And I'm really looking forward to seeing how episode 3 does it. We'll be watching that one tonight.
Yeah. Oh, there's one little subtle thing I wanted to bring up.
Mm-hmm.
It was when it was actually right before the final scene, or the scene with her father, where she comes home after the celebratory dinner from the law firm, and she brings her father home a meal. Yeah. And he's like super excited because she got it from a really fancy restaurant, and he opens it, and it's her favorite meal.
Of course. Yes. And I love that because it is a show don't tell sort of thing, where she brings home something to make him really happy, but it's something that it makes her happy. Yeah. You know what I mean? Where it's like, this thing that I love, well, my dad will probably love it, and brings it home.
Even though he'd been making the exact same
thing. Yes, yeah, I loved that. Again, show don't tell. I'm sure there are times where like autistic people have like bought gifts or whatever, and it means something to them, not necessarily to the person they're giving the gift to.
Yeah. All right, anything else you can think of that you want to bring up autism related?
In this for this episode in particular, not really.
No, there wasn't really much delving into it as much as the first episode.
No, I didn't. We'll see how the next episode does it. But I think what was covered in this episode was really, really good. Mm-hmm. I was impressed. I think, didn't I rate the first episode? Didn't I give it like a 10 out of 10 or
10
something?
10 out of 10, yeah.
I'll give this one an 8.5.
What brought it down in your eyes? Was the stuff with Hua Young?
Yeah, I was like, I don't know. Like, there's a difference between claiming independence, claiming psychological independence, and then just kind of being mean about it. Just kind of like completely disowning your parent in front of everyone else to make you feel empowered.
I suppose.
I just didn't really care for that.
I saw it as more like I'm going to live my own life type of thing.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I know the father was a jerk.
Yeah.
Like, the father was kind of a bad dude. I get that, but...
He was obsessed with marrying into a chaebol, so...
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I get that part. I don't know. It felt a bit over the top to me.
Sure, but at least, like, the most over-the-top part of it... I thought about it. I'm like, well, it wasn't like that was the only thing that was driving her away from the wedding. It was it was a bunch of other things, and that was just the cherry on top. It was more like, I don't really care about marrying into a chaebol. I'm also not a Christian, and the rest.
Oh yeah, because this was important because her father was a Christian,
and so were her future in-laws,
and
very devout Christians. Her future in-laws were very devout Christians, but she was a Buddhist.
That's right. We never brought that up. We say that in the plot summary that it revealed her back had that Buddhist tattoo.
Yeah.
So, yeah. That we should have mentioned that. That was kind of important.
Yeah.
And kind of a big part of her development throughout the episode.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm not Christian, I'm Buddhist.
I don't think her being a lesbian wasn't like, at least it wasn't the only thing that was because she was going to see a psychiatrist about all the pressure she was under. And it wasn't just because of that. It was, I'm also a Buddhist. I don't believe in the same religion that everybody else around me does.
Right. Yeah. Other than that, though, I think that's good. I think we've covered everything we can.
Yeah, I think so, too.
All right. Well, in that case, we're going to watch episode 3 tonight. I'm really looking forward to it. And we will see you guys next week with our next review. Bye.
Bye-bye.